Okay, so Jackie Elliott is one of the co-chairs of the PSC Health and Safety. Jackie, say a few words about what you do, please.
Hi, my name is Jackie Elliott. I'm a senior COT at City Tech in the biology department. And then another hat that I wear is that I'm the co-chair health and safety for the PSC.
Thank you. And David Gerwin, who is the chapter chair at Queens College. David, a few words about what you do, please.
Sure. For this panel, what really matters is that my deep training as a historian and social studies teacher educator is not what led me to be the PSC representative on Queens College's reopening panel. It's the chapter chair position, but my ability to be effective and advocate for health and safety is because of Joan and Jackie, and on my own campus, Ben Chitty and our watchdog group. So I might be a face on a panel, but I work because there's a union behind me.
Super, thank you. So we're going to address two of the demands that CUNY has made, that PSC has made to CUNY. And number two, we are starting with number two, and to us, it's deep in our hearts. Before CUNY requires a single employee to return for on-site work, and I'll come back to that in a moment, CUNY must publicly present a plan for full compliance at every open work site with federal and New York State health and safety guidelines regarding COVID-19. Come back to that. And with all relevant federal guidelines and with the parties' collective bargaining agreement concerning workplace safety. I'll start at the end here, which is that we have a bargaining agreement that clearly says that any harmful effect on campus is a harm to all, and that we have a right to go into a workplace that is free from health and safety hazards. COVID-19 is certainly one of those hazards. About the first part, CUNY must publicly present a plan for full compliance. Well, CUNY Central did rather well at putting together a plan based on most of the state requirements. But where they've seriously fallen down is giving us, the PSC, the plans for each campus, because we live on the campuses, and it's on the campuses that we need to know the details. And I think our central concern here is how do we actually engage with CUNY, because the law says that we have to be actively engaging, sorry about the verbs here, with CUNY in developing the plan. And we don't want to be the ones just grieving it at the end, which we are doing, but we want to be proactive. Jean, can you talk to us a little bit about the watchdogs and what they've been doing since April?
Sure. And I'm Jean Grassman. I am an industrial hygienist. I am based at the CUNY School of Public Health, where I'm a faculty member, and I'm also one of the watchdog coordinators with Jackie. But that said, what I say pretty much at every watchdog meeting is that the watchdogs are, Jackie and I and Joan as emeritus are the coordinators of the watchdogs, but the watchdogs are really throughout CUNY. And to just give you an idea of how this has developed is, as we all departed at the beginning of the pandemic and went to our respective homes to wait it out, I think it was in late April, we started having weekly watchdog meetings, and those watchdog meetings have continued until now. They're open to all members. There's no invitation required. We encourage people to come and sit in And for those that are really interested in, in working to make our workplaces safe, and in this case, our manifest problem, our, and mission here is to take the steps to make sure we return to workplaces where our risk of COVID is relatively low. And to do that, what we need to do is, we don't run health and safety at 25 different campuses. Our responsibility as watchdogs, and I think we're really aptly named, is to identify what problems are, let CUNY know, and hold CUNY to their responsibility to ensure that they have done what they need to do to protect us. So that means, that means a lot of things. The watchdogs go back for many years, and over the years, we have really, we've dealt with mold issues, we've dealt with temperature issues. A lot of what we do is really manifested because we're working in buildings that have been, their infrastructure, their maintenance, their upkeep has been fairly ignored. And so it was challenging beforehand. So now we have, there's something like 300 buildings at CUNY. Some of them are new and operate very well, but, over 50 of them were built before 1929. Those are buildings whose ventilation can be very antiquated. And so one of the challenges that we face is health and safety was difficult before COVID, and now with COVID, it's really important and it's really tricky, and there's a lot that in a building where there wasn't good ventilation beforehand. Now we have essentially a situation, we have an airborne virus in that building. So it is sort of a perfect storm. So going back to watchdogs, we started having weekly meetings in April. We have persisted with those weekly meetings, and there's one tomorrow. If this is new to you, I invite you to come to our meeting tomorrow. I'm Jean Grassman. You can email me. You can contact me through hswatchdogs at pscmail.org. And so initially our meetings were very much, it was April. It was, we were just talking about, what our concerns were in a very general way, concerning, and in the beginning it was, parsing who's an essential employee, who's not an essential employee. What we found out is that everything at CUNY is very dispersed among the campuses. So LaGuardia's definition of an essential employee was different than Brooklyn College's. And this, and these are the people that were having to go into work. So we dealt with that for some time. So fast forward, and I want to give a chance for other questions. What we're doing right now is we are, the different, essentially what we're doing is reviewing the plans. The plans at the various campuses differ vastly in quality. So we have gone from the very general sort of hypothesizing to the very concrete, which is looking at what the circumstances of our return are going to be. So I can talk in more detail about that, but I think I'll just leave it there to give you an overview of, kind of the evolution of the watchdogs in the last 5 months.
Thank you, Jean. Before I turn it over to Jackie, I want to come back to the fact that in our demand, we said that no one should go back until everyone is safe. And we know some people have been called back. And we know some people are there because they've got jobs to do and want to do them. So Jackie will tell us what to do in those cases.
Hi. If you're called back to campus and you find that things are not safe or you're uncertain about anything, the best thing for you to do is to first reach out to your COVID-19 coordinator on your campus. I also urge you to contact facilities, your chapter chair, and of course, the health and safety watchdog. We also have a web form at the PSC website, which you can fill out and let us know if you've been called back to work. Because one thing that I always say is your health is your wealth. And that's the most important thing that matters in this world. We need people to walk around on campus and let us know what buildings are open, what buildings aren't opened. Is there PPE being provided on your campus to people, which you're supposed to get from public safety? Do you have signage? Are you just comfortable of what's going on in your campus? And if it's not, please let us know as soon as possible. And you can reach us at hswatchdogs@pscmail.org. And remember, your health is your wealth.
Thank you. When we started the watchdogs, we said keep it simple, and we had these made up thermometers because at that point, temperature was a main concern, and temperature very much relates to ventilation in buildings. And to talk specifically about one campus, we have David Gerwin with us from the chair of Queens College. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I want to talk about for a moment is what it would actually mean to be invited to participate in a reopening plan on a campus, not in a fake way, late in August, as many PSC chapters were, but much earlier from June, and some of the things that means. So first of all, I want to say that Queens College did not graciously extend an invitation to the union to participate, but they got a phone call from New York State Senator Toby Stavitsky, who chairs higher ed, and then they got a phone call from Congresswoman Grace Meng. And it was really only after Representative Meng called that I received a quite bewildering email that Queens College does not recognize the inherent right of the union to be on the committee, but by the way, show up at 10 a.m. on Tuesday for the meeting. You're appointed. Once I was there, things were more gracious. And I want to give you an example of where just having a non-administration voice matters. So the administration understood that they were not actually reopening Queens College in any imminent way. And yet on their website, there was a very clear sign up for a summer camp to be held starting June 29th that has been held every year and has over 500 kids running it all over campus. And many employees concluded, I think correctly, that if you're going to open a summer camp for 500 kids, that must mean you're calling us all back to work. And many people on the campus have had roles with the summer camp. So people from the IT department were besieging us with questions. Are we running the robotics camp? No one's told us. So that camp never reopened. But the idea that it was up there on the website and the administration thought that it was clear to everyone the campus was remaining closed shows you how isolated the administrators get on Zoom. When it comes to reopening in a more transparent way, and we'll talk about this more when we really focus on the question of being called back to work, I just want to say a few words about the balancing act involved. It really is true that, as Joan said, there are faculty members and staff members who have been clamoring to come back to campus to start research projects that are grant funded and time bound. And the first thing we did in June was get a safe reopening plan for the labs. And that meant upgrading all the ventilation filters in the new science building and 2 other buildings on campus. It meant putting up signage, as they've said. It meant actually doing a floor plan room by room and seeing also hour by hour who would be on campus in what building, just to make sure that the bathrooms weren't overloaded, and not letting people come back until we had signage up designating some stairways as up and some as down. And then we still got concerns from a faculty member who might be more junior or a doctoral student saying, hey, my professor can drive to campus, but I have to take 2 buses and the subway. What's the safe way for me to get to work? So that's a whole set of concerns. On campus, every single course that will have even a pickup of materials is listed as hybrid at Queens College. And we've also had faculty who've said, I don't have a quiet place to teach a synchronous course. I need access to my office or to a quiet room in the library. And that's why we're partially reopening the library. But in order to do this safely, we had a process that took place in July when faculty applied and chairs and deans reviewed that, and then a working group committee that was composed of both faculty and administration went through each demand and said, you know, it really is true that your writing intensive course would be better in person, but it's going to be good enough remote. And only that class that really needs to use that advanced physics equipment or the kiln or string instruments and music in a really big room are the things that we will allow to take place. And that was a long deliberative process. And it's still playing out in some ways, and figuring out what roles faculty feel comfortable playing in allowing people to come on campus is a question. And the thing I'll close with that we'll talk about more in the next segment is I don't feel that the same scrutiny and care got applied to all of the potential spaces where staff might come back as volunteers or in order just to pick up materials or to do something important for 3 hours, you know, a few times a semester. But this process at Queens is not what happened at most of CUNY, and I'll stop it there.
Thank you, David. That was a great example. And when you say it's not what happened at most of CUNY, we are lacking even reports from many campuses, and some campuses are still trying to get parts for their HVAC systems, although they plan on opening buildings. We have a different opinion on that. It's time now, and David took us on a nice transition to the second demand. I'm sorry, it's the third demand. It's the second demand we're doing. It is, CUNY must agree that even after on-site work resumes, the university will provide accommodations, including permission to continue remote work for employees at risk of serious illness or death as a result of contracting COVID-19. The latter part is directly from our contract. I want to give some background on this demand. CUNY's own guidelines say some very specific things. Accommodation means the right to have an alternative worksite. It isn't necessarily an ADA term, although it is applied to ADA, importantly. CUNY's operational considerations include limit in-person presence to only those staff who are necessary to be at the institution. The temporary telecommuting policy adopted during the New York State on pause, if we remember back to March, will remain in effect until a new telecommuting policy is in place. We do not have a new policy. We are still on remote work. And another bullet in CUNY's plan, and this is CUNY's guidelines, encourage remote work for as many faculty and staff as possible, especially employees at higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19. So it is very disappointing that on some campuses, staff is called back and told to report to work. And it's critical that we hear from them, and critical that their eyes and ears and nose are effective weapons in finding out what's going on in their workplace. Jean, I think you're still here. Jean has video and phone for audio. Can you say a few words about what watchdogs are doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So right now, I talked about the evolution of the watchdogs, and I should mention that right now we have watchdogs at virtually every campus and location throughout CUNY. And so we're looking at probably between 150 and 200 members that are serving on this. And accommodation as part of the plans that each campus has put together, as Joan said, it hasn't gotten as much attention as other aspects of the plan. So we have a lot of details on face coverings and the 6-foot distances, and cleaning and disinfection, which are important, but there is relatively little on basically protection of vulnerable groups, other than, and this I think that this translates from the state guidelines to the CUNY guidelines. There's just a very general protection. So we don't have a lot of details on that. And ADA protections really are somewhat related, but somewhat different. For instance, for COVID, age is a risk factor, and of course under ADA, age is not considered something that's coverable under ADA. So we are in kind of a complicated situation in terms of making sure those people are protected. So just going back to what the watchdogs are doing, what we have worked on over the summer is really putting together checklists and tools for our members to use for those that are going back. So there is, kind of a balance of, needing to protect those that really want to work remotely. And I think other unions have been, and other employers, not other unions, but other employers have done some work around facilitated accommodation. And we just aren't getting that from CUNY. So for those that are going back, we're really doing our best to make sure that we can monitor situations. And a lot of what this comes down to is ventilation, and really with an airborne virus, really keeping track of the ventilation and sort of the building infrastructure. So we do have a checklist. We hope to unveil it tomorrow at the watchdog meeting, and to make it easy for people who are watchdogs and somewhat familiar with some of the technicalities, to really see what's going on in their building. So really, it's kind of a two-part answer, dealing with accommodations, but also coming back to the real physical encounters with our campuses.
Thank you, Jean. Jackie, really importantly, we've got several steps, and could you repeat them about what people could do if they are called back, if they're entering a building?
Most definitely. People who are called back right now, you are watchdogs. You are our eyes and ears to what's going on, and relaying the information to everybody. If you have been called back to campus and you find that you're uncomfortable, you're not feeling well, or even better yet, the guidelines that have been put in place, if they are not being followed, you should first reach out to your COVID-19 coordinator at every campus. reach out to facilities, reach out to a health and safety watchdog chairperson at each campus. Even if you don't know who they are, everybody knows somebody that's a watchdog or watchdog affiliated, one way or the other. Please reach out to us. And also, if you're called back, please go to the PSC website and fill out the web form, because the PSC is fighting really hard for you to make sure that you're safe. That's the most important thing. And of course, as I always say, your health is your wealth.
Thank you, Jackie. David, on your campus, where you finally got invited to the committee.
So let me say a few words about essential employees and then about everybody else. Essential employees used to mean that you were told you were essential when you were hired. And if something like a snowstorm or Hurricane Sandy hit, you might still need to get to campus in order to clear the walk, take care of the animals in the lab. Right? These are or work with the IT infrastructure so the email doesn't go out or the website go down more than necessary. But in a COVID emergency where New York on pause lasted much longer, my favorite example is the intrepid piano tuner in the music department. If you leave the pianos alone for months on time, you will have hundreds of thousands of dollars of useless pianos you will need to replace. And every bit as much as the animal CLT workers want to take care of the animals, the CLT in music wanted to take care of the pianos and was going back in regularly, though I did not know about this, and not everyone in the Queen's administration understood this. So we've had a lot of verbiage around who is an essential employee and no agreement. And what we've done in the end is just ask for the list of members who are going onto campus at all, because that makes it a lot simpler. Now we don't argue about who's essential and who isn't. As I said, in order to teach a course or to be in a lab, you had to apply to do that. But not every adjunct who got hired to teach one of the labs where the professor applied for in-person meetings was part of that application process. On our campus, any adjunct who is given a course with in-person meetings does not need to hold those in-person meetings. Every single course that had any in-person component had to have a plan for a virtual alternative for students who did not feel comfortable coming, and to go all virtual in the case of another pause or a reason on campus to shut down. So that's very important to say for everybody. Our president, who started in the middle of the pandemic, Frank Wu, has also talked about ADA Plus. That is the idea, and CUNY is supposed to have regulations they're formulating around this, that it's not just you having an underlying condition that might prevent you from coming to campus. If you have someone in your household or someone you care for who has an underlying condition and your exposure on campus could be threatening to them, we don't want you coming to campus. So that's the standard in general that we want to follow. But here's where it gets complicated. Let's say an office writes to people and says, well, what are the things that would be useful to do on campus? So we can tell that to facilities to prepare it. And 3 of the people in your workspace email in and say things like, oh, I would feel comfortable coming back to do this or that. And you would like to write, I don't feel comfortable coming back to campus at all. But that's not, but everybody else in your unit is doing it, and CUNY has just had layoffs. So that becomes a very subtle problem. And when I shared a specific case with President Wu, within 2 weeks, that employee got an email from the supervisor saying, why did you go to the union? And we said to President Wu, that is really not the result that you want. So the idea of having a workplace that not only says don't come back, but really means don't come back, and can communicate clearly from supervisors on down that we are working remote, that we know that working remote is difficult. A whole other conversation that's not about safety would be about workload, how it's possible to manage the workload, because it's not right now. The bottom line is really for classes and workload and the rest of it, we need more faculty and staff during COVID, not larger class sizes or people working off of their iPhones. We need a lot more support. That's not the exact safety issue, but it's related to the pressures that people feel about coming back in order to better get the job done. And I just want to echo what Jackie said, and Joan and Jean, stay remote, stay safe, and squawk really loudly if someone says anything to the contrary, because we have your back.
Thank you, David. The squawking principle works. Thank you. The concept of ADA plus, this is actually the first I'm hearing of it, and it's really important, and glad that Queens College is at least beginning to apply it. We get a lot of requests about the fact that, well, I think I'm okay, but I live with somebody who has underlying health issues. And that's equally important, because you would have to go home to that person. So to return to the issue that we started with about ventilation, ventilation underlies all of this. And I don't want to jump so fast really over David's emphasis on stress, because remote work is stressful, but other panels will come back to that. And we were asked to talk really about building safety and the risks one faces in buildings, and what we're trying to do as a union to help you be in spaces that are relatively risk-free. So that comes back to ventilation. And ventilation is a tricky issue given, as Jean says, the age of our buildings and the lack of funding, the critical lack of funding for maintenance of our buildings. Anyone listening or watching knows this. The ventilation principles that the guidelines that the State Department of Health outlined were maximum air intake, that is bringing in the maximum amount of outside air, like airplanes are doing now, or say that they're doing. And that putting on filters that have the maximum capacity, they're called MERV 13 or higher, of catching small particles of disease. These standards are not specific for universities and colleges. Shortly after university and colleges had these guidelines announced, they were announced by the governor, the one who doesn't fund us, for malls. And for malls, they said, the HVAC systems, that's the heating and ventilating, need to run at 100% outside air. And they need to have MERV 13 or higher filters. Well, we believe we're as important as malls. And we want to be held to that standard too. Jean is an expert on this. And Jean, can you say a few words about what are the things we're looking at with HVAC systems?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So for one thing at CUNY, some buildings are old enough they don't even have HVAC systems, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And so they operate, basically ventilation is passive through those buildings. I think some of them have been upgraded in recent years, but it is not, it's not universal. For what we look for, and the complication here is that with COVID and an airborne virus, what the recommendations are essentially to run ventilation systems longer, if possible, run them 24 hours, run the HVAC systems as if the building is at maximal capacity. So you can see what all these things, open the dampers, all these things are meant to increase the throughput of air, and of course bring in, if possible, 100% outside air, because that's really, it's the dilution effect of, reducing the risk. Basically, you're diluting out the virus, the virus that is airborne. So that's one principle. And then the other is what Joan alluded to are the filters, which actually clean the air. So you've got, quantity and then quality in terms of the MERV filters. And in fact, a lot of the older systems don't accept MERV 13 filters. Basically, if you have kind of an antiquated HVAC system, it puts too much pressure on the system to actually have a MERV 13 filter. So we're finding that a lot of our campuses have MERV 8. So this is, that's kind of a short, semi-technical solution. So one of the things that ventilation gets to is it determines occupancy. So if you have kind of compromised ventilation, you can't have as many people in the building, and you need to keep them more distant. So you can see all these factors are somewhat interrelated. So I'm going to send it back to Joan for a sum up, because I think we're coming to the end of our time. But anyhow, this is just, the watchdogs are there for you. The union is there for you. We want to make it safe for each and every person.
Thank you, Jean.
Yeah.
And you don't need to know the complexities of HVAC systems. All you need to know is if where you are feels like it has enough outside air, if you're comfortable, if there's air flowing, and so many of you have reported areas that are in dead-end zones. Please think about joining the watchdogs, as Jean said. That's HS Watchdogs at psc.org. But most importantly, think about you're your own health and safety expert. You know what's good for you. And thank you for being with us.